6 years. That is how long I lived next door to a woman and her little girl while my son told me they were dangerous. He built a fence to keep them out. He filed lawsuits to drive them away, and I believed every word he said because he was my son. But through an old basement vent, I heard her playing piano every night, and her daughter heard me playing guitar. We never spoke a word, but the music said everything. Then she died, and no one came to her funeral. A lawyer placed an envelope in my hands. When I read what was inside, I could not stand. My son had not been protecting me. He had been hiding the worst secret of his life. Thank you for being here with me today. It truly means a lot. Before we continue, take a moment to comment where you are watching from. Some to bite a for piche. The stories like this are not about what is real or not, but about the choices we make and the truths we ignore. And maybe there is something in it worth reflecting on for ourselves today. The funeral was on a Wednesday. I stood alone at the edge of the grave, rain soaking through my jacket. Bonaventure Cemetery stretched out in every direction. Ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss, crumbling headstones half swallowed by ivy, and a silence so thick the earth itself seemed to be holding its breath. The casket was already in the ground. No flowers, no priest, no reception, just me, and the sound of rain hammering against the lid of a box that held a woman I barely knew. Grace Wynn, 33 years old, dead from what the obituary called a fall down the stairs. Survived by her daughter, Sophie, age 7. I did not know Grace well. For 6 years she had lived next to my son's house, just on the other side of a fence so tall I could not see her front door. I had heard her piano through the basement vent at night, slow melodies drifting up through the old ductwork, connecting our foundations. But I had never sat across from her at a table, never shared a meal, never asked her how she was doing. My son Nathan had made sure of that. 2 weeks before the funeral, Nathan had pulled me aside after Sunday dinner. He set down his fork and looked at me with that hard expression he always got when he wanted something. "Dad, stay away from that woman next door. Grace. Why? She is dangerous. She has been stalking Brooke and me for years. She is unstable. Just trust me on this." I had nodded. Nathan was my son. 36 years old. Successful business, beautiful wife. He had never given me a reason to doubt him. So, I trusted him, the way a father trusts the boy he raised. But 3 days ago I had seen the obituary in the Savannah Morning News. Grace Wynn, 33, passed away, unexpectedly. Survived by her daughter, Sophie, age 7. She was 33. Too young, far too young. So I came to the funeral, and nobody else did. The rain picked up. I turned to leave, and a woman in a dark coat stepped into my path. She had appeared from nowhere, or maybe she had been standing behind one of the oaks, waiting. "Mr. Caldwell." I stopped. She was mid-40s, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a leather briefcase tucked under one arm. "My name is Diana Marsh. I am an attorney." She pulled out a large envelope, slightly damp from the rain. "Grace Wynn left this for you. She asked me to deliver it personally after her passing." My name was written across the front in handwriting I did not recognize. Robert Caldwell. The ink had bled a little, but it was still legible. "Why me?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Something flickered behind her eyes. Pity. Maybe. Or something heavier. She said you would understand. Once you read it. Before I could ask anything else, she turned and walked away, disappearing between the gravestones, until the rain swallowed her completely. I stood there holding the envelope. I could feel something thick inside. Pages, documents, something stiff like cardboard. I tucked it inside my jacket and walked back to my car. I did not open it in the car. I did not open it on the drive home through the gray Savannah streets, past the squares with their dripping fountains, past the old houses with their shuttered windows. I waited until I was alone in my kitchen. The door locked, the curtains drawn. The only light came from the small lamp above the stove, casting a yellow circle on the table and leaving everything else in shadow. I sat down. My hands were shaking and I could not make them stop. I do not know if it was the cold or the fear or something deeper, some part of me that already knew what was inside before I tore it open. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside were three things. A letter, 8 pages, handwritten on lined notebook paper, a thick stack of documents, receipts, photographs, printed emails, and a smaller sealed envelope stamped with a medical laboratory logo and marked in red ink, DNA test results. I set the smaller envelope aside and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as if the person writing it had been racing against something. A deadline, or something worse. Dear Robert, the letter began. If you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry you have to learn the truth this way, but there is no one else I can trust. What I am about to tell you will be difficult to believe. It will hurt, and it will change everything you think you know about your son. I stopped reading. My chest felt tight. I looked at the photograph on the wall. Nathan, at 12 years old, holding a fishing rod, grinning into the camera. My boy. I forced myself to keep reading. 10 years ago, I met your son Nathan. He was 26. I was 23. We worked together at a real estate investment firm in Charleston. He was charming, funny, and kind. We fell in love. When I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. My hands trembled so badly I had to press the pages flat against the table. The kitchen was silent except for rain against the windows and my own breathing, shallow and uneven. I read for a long time. When I finally set the letter down and reached for the smaller envelope, my fingers felt numb. I tore it open. The results were printed on thick paper, stamped and certified by a medical laboratory in Atlanta. 2 names. Paternal grandfather, Robert Caldwell. Child, Sophie Nguyen. And at the bottom, in bold black type, a number. Probability of biological relationship. 99.94%. The paper slipped from my fingers and landed on the table. I stared at it. The numbers blurred and sharpened and blurred again. Sophie. The little girl next door. The one I had heard laughing through the fence. The one who listened to my guitar through the basement vent every night. She was my granddaughter. And I had never known she existed. For a long time, I just sat there. The DNA results lay on the table in front of me, the numbers still burning behind my eyes. 99.94%. I had a granddaughter. She had been living 30 feet from my kitchen window for 6 years. And I never knew. I picked up the letter again. My hands had not stopped shaking, but I forced my eyes back to the page. Grace had more to tell me. And whatever it was, she had died to make sure I would hear it. Nathan stopped returning my calls the week I told him I was pregnant. The letter continued. 2 weeks later, I saw him in Charleston with another woman, Brooke. 3 months after that, they were married. I did not understand. We had been happy, or I thought we had been. I had to stop reading. I set the letter down and pressed my palms against the table, breathing slowly. Rain tapped against the window. The house was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I picked the letter back up. But what Nathan did to me was not the worst of it, Robert. What he did to those families was far worse. During the 2 years we worked together at the firm in Charleston, Nathan was managing retirement investment accounts for a community of elderly clients, 43 families. Teachers, electricians, nurses, people who had worked their entire lives and trusted their savings to your son. He stole from them. All of them. Over the course of 18 months, Nathan diverted $3.2 million from their retirement accounts into shell companies he controlled with his business partner, a man named Marcus Webb. They hid the money through a chain of flower shops owned by Brooke called Brooke's Blossoms. By the time the clients realized their accounts were empty, Nathan had already left Charleston and moved to Savannah. I stopped breathing. $3.2 million. 43 families. I read the number again, hoping I had misunderstood, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less terrible. They did not. I was the firm's accountant, Grace wrote. I discovered the discrepancies 6 months after Nathan left. The numbers did not add up. Transfers to companies that did not exist. Signatures that had been forged. I reported it internally, but the firm buried it. They were afraid of the scandal. So I started collecting evidence on my own. I turned the page. The handwriting grew smaller here, tighter, as though Grace had been pressing the pen harder into the paper. One of those families. Robert, Harold, and Margaret Jennings. Harold was 74 years old. He had worked as an electrician for 47 years. Every paycheck, he put a little aside. He and Margaret had saved enough to retire comfortably. It was not a fortune, but it was theirs. They had earned it. Nathan took everything. Every cent. When Harold found out his account was empty, he could not face Margaret. He wrote her a letter that said, "Dear Maggie, I worked 47 years, and I have nothing left to give you. Forgive me." Then he took his own life. I set the letter down. I could not read any further. Not yet. I stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen sink and gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. The rain was heavier now, hammering the roof, flooding the gutters. I stared out the window at the darkness where Grace's house stood. Invisible behind that 8-foot fence my son had built. 43 families. A man dead. Because of Nathan. I sat back down. I had to finish. Harold was not the only one who suffered. Grace continued. I have documented all 43 cases. Couples in their 80s, forced to go back to work. A woman with cancer, who could not afford treatment. Families torn apart, lives destroyed, and your son walked away from all of it. He moved to Savannah, married Brooke, started a new business, and pretended none of it ever happened. I turned to the next page. Grace's handwriting changed again here. The letters were looser, shakier. She had been crying when she wrote this part. Robert, there is something else you need to know. 6 months ago, I hired an attorney, Diana Marsh. She helped me write a will naming you as Sophie's legal guardian. She also helped me gather the evidence I have been collecting for years. Financial records, emails, receipts. Everything that proves what Nathan did in Charleston. But while I was gathering evidence against Nathan, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Your son has changed your will. He forged your signature on new documents that transfer your entire estate, your house, your savings, everything, into his name upon your death. You did not sign those papers, Robert. He did it without your knowledge. The room tilted. I read the paragraph again, then a third time. Nathan had changed my will, my house, my savings, everything I had worked for in 71 years, and he had signed it away behind my back. I turned to the final pages. The handwriting here was the steadiest of all, as though Grace had gathered every ounce of courage she had left and poured it into these last words. Robert, I moved to Savannah 6 years ago because I wanted Sophie to know her father. Even if Nathan refused to acknowledge her, I thought maybe being close would change things. It did not. Nathan and Brooke built that fence the week I arrived. They filed lawsuits against me, noise complaints, property disputes, harassment accusations. Brooke threatened me more than once. She told me if I did not leave, I would regret it. I am telling you all of this because I am scared. 2 nights ago, I saw Brooke near my stairs. She was inside my house, Robert. I do not know how she got in. I confronted her, and she smiled at me and said, "Accidents happen in old houses. I have a video. I recorded it 3 days ago and hid it somewhere safe. along with all the financial evidence. Diana Marsh knows where. If something happens to me, she will tell you. I am asking you to do two things. First, protect Sophie. She is 7 years old. She is smart and kind, and she loves music. She is your granddaughter, and she needs you. Second, do not let Nathan bury the truth again. 43 families deserve justice. Harold Jennings deserves justice. And if I am gone, then I deserve it too. The final lines were written in ink that had smudged, as though tears had fallen on the page. I am sorry, Robert. I am sorry that your son is not the man you thought he was. I am sorry that you have to learn it this way. But you are the only good person left in this story. And Sophie needs someone good. Please do not let them win. Grace. I set the letter down on the table. The 8 pages lay there in the yellow lamplight, edges curled, ink blurred in places. I stared at them for a long time. Then I looked out the window. Grace's house was dark. No lights. No car. No sound. Just the rain and the fence and the silence of a woman who had tried to tell the truth and paid for it with her life. I stood at the kitchen window for a long time, staring at the dark shape of Grace's house behind the fence. The rain had slowed to a thin drizzle. No lights over there. No sound. Just emptiness. But it had not always been that way. I closed my eyes, and the memory came flooding back like a song I had tried to forget. 6 years ago. September 2019. A warm afternoon in Savannah. The kind where the air smells like magnolia, and the Spanish moss hangs so still it looks painted on the oaks. I had been sitting on my back porch with a glass of sweet tea when I heard the moving truck pull up on the other side of the property line. A young woman climbed out, mid-20s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She wore jeans and a faded blue shirt, and she moved like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Behind her, a toddler wobbled on unsteady legs across the driveway, clutching a stuffed rabbit that was almost as big as she was. I did not think much of it. New neighbors. Savannah was that kind of town. People came and went. But the next morning, I woke to the sound of hammering. I walked out back and stopped. Nathan and 2 hired men were driving posts into the ground along the entire property line. Not a picket fence. Not a garden border. 8 feet of solid cedar planks. Tight together, no gaps. No windows. No gate. A wall. By the end of the day, the neighbor's house had vanished behind it. I could not see the roof. Could not see the windows. Could not see anything at all. I walked over to Nathan that evening. He was loading tools into his truck, sweat darkening his collar. "What is all this?" I asked. He did not look at me. Just kept loading. "Security." "Security from what?" "From her." He jerked his head toward the fence. "That woman moved here on purpose. She has been stalking Brooke and me since Charleston. She is mentally unstable, dangerous." I frowned. "Stalking you? She is obsessed with us, Dad. She showed up at Brooke's workplace twice. She sends letters. She follows us. We had to get a restraining order in Charleston, and now she has moved in right next door." He stopped and looked at me. His eyes were hard. "Just stay away from her. Do not talk to her. Do not even look at her. Okay?" I looked at the fence. 8 feet of cedar, like a fortress wall. It seemed excessive for a quiet street in Ardsley Park. But Nathan was my son, and he seemed genuinely afraid. So I nodded. "All right. I trust you." And I did. For a while, the first month was quiet. I did not see the woman. I did not hear the woman. The fence did its job. The house next door might as well have been on another continent. Then one evening in late October, I went down to my basement to look for a box of old records. The basement was half finished. Concrete floor. Exposed pipes. A workbench where I kept my guitar and my woodworking tools. I had not been down there in weeks. I was rummaging through a shelf when I heard it. Piano. Soft and distant, floating through the stillness like smoke. A melody I recognized, but could not name at first. Slow, delicate, each note placed carefully, like someone setting stones across a stream. I stood completely still, holding my breath. The music was coming from the old heating vent in the corner, a cast iron grate set into the wall near the floor. The houses on this street were built in the 1940s, and the original ductwork still connected the basements through a shared ventilation channel. I had never thought about it before. Never had a reason to. But now, standing in the dim light of my basement, I could hear Grace Wynne playing piano as clearly as if she were in the room with me. Clair de Lune. That was the piece. Debussy. I recognized it now. My wife Eleanor had loved that piece. She used to hum it while she cooked dinner, swaying gently at the stove. Grace played it differently than any recording I had ever heard. Slower. Sadder. Each note held a fraction longer than it should have been, as though she were reluctant to let it go, as though the music was the only thing she had left. I sat down on the basement floor and listened until the last note faded into silence. Then I sat there a while longer in the dark, feeling something I had not felt since Eleanor died. Connection. After that night, I came down to the basement more often. Not every evening, but 2 or 3 times a week. Grace played almost every night. Sometimes Clair de Lune. Sometimes pieces I did not recognize, slow and wandering, like she was improvising, following the music wherever it wanted to go. One night in November, I brought my guitar down. I had not played in months. My fingers were stiff and clumsy on the strings, but I sat by the vent and played a simple melody, an old folk tune Eleanor and I used to sing together. I played quietly, half embarrassed, not sure if the sound would even carry through the vent. When I finished, I sat in the silence, listening. Nothing. I set the guitar down and started to stand. Then I heard it. 3 soft knocks on the metal vent. Tap, 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 coming from the other side. My heart jumped. I knelt beside the vent and knocked back. Tap, tap, tap. A pause. Then 2 quick knocks. I knocked twice. Another pause, longer this time. And then a voice. Small, high, barely louder than a whisper, drifting through the metal grate like a secret passed between 2 people who were not supposed to be talking. More, please. It was not Grace. The voice was too small, too young. It was the little girl, Sophie. She had been sitting on the other side of the vent, listening to me play guitar in the dark. I picked up the guitar, pressed my back against the wall, and played another song, and another, and another, until I heard the softest sound in the world float through that old iron grate. A child laughing. That one word changed everything. More. A child on the other side of a wall, asking a stranger to keep playing. And I did. I kept playing every night that week. And the next week. And the week after that. Sophie was always there, sitting by the vent, listening. Within a month, we had developed a language. 2 knocks meant hello. 3 knocks meant play something. 1 long knock meant good night. I would play a few chords on the guitar. She would tap along on the metal grate with her small fingers, keeping time. She had a natural sense of rhythm, even at 2 years old. It was in her blood. Sometime in early 2020, I discovered the gap. The fence Nathan had built ran the entire length of the property line. But at the far corner, where it met the old brick wall of the garage, the cedar had not been fitted properly. There was a space at the base, no wider than a dinner plate, where the wood had pulled away from the brick. You would never notice it unless you were looking. I was looking. I knelt down one afternoon and peered through. On the other side, a small face peered back. Dark eyes, dark hair, a smear of peanut butter on one cheek. Sophie held a dandelion in her fist. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she pushed the dandelion through the gap. "For you," she whispered. I took it. The next day, I left a small piece of butterscotch candy and a folded piece of paper with a simple melody drawn in pencil, quarter notes, and half notes on a 5-line staff. When I came back the following morning, the candy was gone. In its place was a crayon drawing of a yellow bird. That was how it started. The gap in the fence became our mailbox. I left candy and little melodies. Sophie left drawings and wildflowers, sometimes a pine cone, sometimes a pretty rock she had found. As she grew older, the drawings became more detailed. Birds with every feather drawn. Trees with faces in the bark. A man with a guitar sitting beside a wall. When Sophie was 4, she started talking to me through the gap. Short sentences at first. "I drew a horse today. Miss Linda, at daycare, has a cat. Mama cried last night, but she said she was okay." That last one stayed with me. By the time she was 5, our conversations were longer. I would sit on my side of the fence with my back against the cedar, and Sophie would sit on hers, and we would talk while the Savannah sun made patterns through the Spanish moss overhead. She told me about school, about the books she liked, about the birds she saw in the yard. I told her about the guitar, about music, about the constellations. I taught her the names of trees. She taught me the names of her stuffed animals, all 14 of them. Grace knew about us. She had to. One afternoon I heard footsteps on the other side, and Grace's voice, soft and cautious. "Robert?" "Yes." A pause. "Then thank you for being kind to her." After that, Grace started bringing 2 cups of coffee to the fence. She would set one on the ground near the gap, and I would reach through and take it. We sat on opposite sides of the wall and talked while Sophie played in the yard. Grace never told me about Nathan, never mentioned Charleston or the money or any of it. She talked about her jobs, waitressing mornings and cleaning houses evenings. She talked about Sophie's piano lessons, how the girl had started picking out melodies on the old upright Grace had bought secondhand. "She is learning Clair de Lune," Grace told me one afternoon. I could hear the pride breaking through the exhaustion in her voice. She heard me play it through the vent, and she wanted to learn it herself. I smiled. "She has a gift." "She does." Grace paused. "She gets it from somewhere. Not from me." The years passed. Sophie grew. Her piano playing grew with her. Some nights I would go down to the basement just to listen. She stumbled through the opening bars of Clair de Lune for months, hitting wrong notes, starting over, but she never quit. By the time she was 6, she could play the first 2 pages clean. By 7, the whole piece. And she played it the way Grace played it. Slow. Tender. Each note held a little longer than it needed to be. But the years were not kind to Grace. Nathan and Brooke filed lawsuits every few months. Noise complaints. Property line disputes. An accusation that Grace's tree had damaged their roof. Papers arrived at Grace's door like clockwork, each one dragging her back to court, each one costing money she did not have. Over 6 years, Grace spent more than $9,000 defending herself against claims that went nowhere. I saw what it was doing to her. Through the gap in the fence, I could see the circles under her eyes getting darker. I could hear the trembling in her voice when she poured the coffee. One evening I heard Brooke screaming at Grace in the driveway. I could not make out every word, but I heard enough. "You should have left when you had the chance. You are going to regret staying here." I wanted to say something. I wanted to walk around that fence and tell Brooke to leave her alone. But Nathan had told me Grace was dangerous, and I had promised to stay away. So I stayed on my side of the wall and said nothing. I will carry that silence with me for the rest of my life. 6 months before Grace died, she said something I cannot forget. We were sitting by the fence. Sophie was inside napping. The afternoon was warm and still, and the coffee had gone cold in my hands. "Robert," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. If something happens to me, promise you will take care of Sophie." I set the coffee down. What do you mean? They are hiding something terrible. Your son and his wife. I can feel it closing in. And I am scared that one day they are going to make sure I cannot talk. Her voice cracked on the last word. I leaned closer to the gap. Grace. What are you saying? She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, just promise me. Please. I promise, I said. 6 months later, she was dead. And I was sitting in my kitchen holding her letter, realizing that I had kept my promise to stay away from her when I should have kept my promise to protect her. I sat in that kitchen until the sky outside turned from black to gray. The letter lay on the table beside the DNA results and the stack of documents I had not yet looked through. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. I had not slept, but I had made a decision. I picked up the phone and called Nathan. It rang 4 times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep. Dad, it is 6 a.m. Is everything okay? I need to see you, I said. Come to the house. When? Now. A pause. All right. Give me an hour. He arrived in 40 minutes. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the door slam, his footsteps on the porch. I opened the front door and stepped aside. He walked in wearing a polo shirt and khakis, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked around the kitchen, his eyes scanning the table where I had stacked the documents neatly beside the letter. What is all this? He asked. Sit down, I said. He did not sit. He crossed his arms and leaned against the counter. Dad, what is going on? You look terrible. Did you sleep at all? I went to a funeral yesterday, I said. His face changed. Just a flicker. There. And gone. A tightening around the eyes. Whose funeral? Grace when? For a moment he did not move. Then he let out a short breath through his nose and shook his head. I told you to stay away from her, Dad. She is gone, Nathan. She cannot hurt anyone now. Good. He looked at me, his jaw tight. That woman was a threat. She was obsessed with us. She stalked Brooke for years. She moved next door, on purpose, to torment us. Before I could respond, he pushed off the counter. Hey, do you mind if I use the bathroom? Long drive. I waved toward the hallway. He disappeared down the corridor. I heard the bathroom door close. He was gone for nearly 5 minutes. At the time, I did not think anything of it. He was my son. He had used that bathroom 1,000 times. When he came back, I was ready. I reached into the stack of documents and pulled out the folded DNA test. I held it out to him. He looked at it but did not take it. What is that? Read it. He snatched it from my hand, unfolded it, and read. I watched his face. The color drained out of it slowly, starting at his forehead and moving down, like someone had pulled a plug. Where did you get this? He said. His voice was flat. Grace left it for me, along with a letter. 8 pages. He looked up. What did it say? That you and Grace were together in Charleston. That Sophie is your daughter. That you abandoned them both when Grace told you she was pregnant. I paused. My throat was so tight the words barely fit through. And that you stole $3.2 million from 43 families, and a man named Harold Jennings killed himself because of what you did. Nathan's face twisted. He crumpled the DNA paper in his fist and threw it on the floor. She lied. She was crazy, Dad. She made all of this up. Those tests can be faked. Anyone can print a piece of paper with numbers on it. It is certified by a medical laboratory in Atlanta, I said. I do not care. He stepped closer. His voice was rising. She was a liar, a stalker. And now she is trying to ruin me from beyond the grave. What about the 43 families, Nathan? He went still. What about Harold Jennings? The man who worked 47 years and lost everything because of you? The man who wrote his wife a letter and then took his own life? Nathan's eyes hardened. Something shifted behind them. The charm, the polish, the confidence I had always admired in my son It all fell away. And underneath it was something I had never seen before. Cold. Calculating. Cornered. "You are a senile old man," he said slowly. "Being manipulated by a dead woman who spent 6 years trying to destroy my family. If you believe her over me, your own son, then maybe you have lost more than I thought." I looked at him. At the boy I had taught to play guitar when he was 8. The teenager who had mowed lawns every summer to save for college. The young man who had hugged me at his wedding and said, "I hope I can be half the father you were." I did not recognize him. "Get out," I said quietly. He stared at me. "What?" "Get out of my house." His mouth opened, closed. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or the realization that for the first time in his life, his father was not going to believe him. He turned and walked out. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to his car back out of the driveway and disappear down the street. The house was very quiet. I looked at the crumpled DNA paper on the floor. I bent down, picked it up, and smoothed it flat on the table. That night, I went through my usual routine. I brushed my teeth. I changed into pajamas. I opened the medicine cabinet and took out my blood pressure medication. The small white pills I had been taking every evening for 4 years. I shook one into my palm, swallowed it with water, and went to bed. I woke on the kitchen floor. I do not remember getting out of bed. I do not remember walking to the kitchen, but I was lying on the cold tile, my face pressed against the floor, and there was blood coming from my nose. My left arm was numb. My vision was blurred. The room was spinning, and I could not make it stop. I crawled across the floor. It took me a long time. The phone was on the counter. I reached up, knocked it off the edge, and it clattered down beside me. I dialed 911 with fingers that would barely move. "I need help," I whispered. "Something is wrong." Then everything went gray. Bright lights. A steady beeping sound. A voice somewhere above me. Calm and professional. "Mr. Caldwell, can you hear me?" I tried to open my eyes. The fluorescent ceiling swam into focus. White tiles, metal rails, a plastic tube taped to the back of my hand. Hospital. I was in a hospital. A woman in blue scrubs leaned over me. She had short gray hair and steady eyes. "You are at Memorial Health," she said. "A neighbor heard you calling for help and dialed 911. You have been unconscious for approximately 3 hours. What happened?" I whispered. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. She pulled up a chair beside the bed and sat down. Her name tag read, Dr. Evelyn Hart. "When you were brought in, we ran a complete blood panel," she said. "Your blood pressure medication levels were dangerously elevated. 3 times the normal dose." I blinked. "That is not possible. I only take 1 pill." "I believe you," she said. "But the pills in your bottle are not what they should be. Someone replaced your medication with a higher concentration. The pills look identical. Same shape, same color. But the dosage is triple what was prescribed." She paused, letting that sink in. "If you had taken 1 more dose at that level, you would have had a stroke. Possibly fatal." The room felt very cold. I stared at the ceiling and thought about my medicine cabinet, the bathroom down the hallway, the door closing. 5 minutes. Nathan had come to my house yesterday morning. He had asked to use the bathroom. He had been in there for 5 minutes. Alone. With the medicine cabinet right there above the sink. Someone tampered with them. I said, "Yes," Dr. Hart replied. "We have already reported it to the police. A detective will be here shortly." I closed my eyes. The beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence. I tried to arrange the pieces in my head. The letter. The DNA test. Nathan's fury when I confronted him. The bathroom door closing. 5 minutes. And then the pills that should have killed me. No. I did not want to believe it. I could not believe that the boy I raised, the child I taught to ride a bicycle on Abercorn Street, would open my medicine cabinet and replace my pills with something that could stop my heart. But the thought was there now, and it would not leave. The detective arrived that afternoon. She knocked twice before entering, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp dark eyes and a navy blazer over a white shirt. She carried a leather folder and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent 20 years walking into rooms where terrible things had happened. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, pulling a chair beside the bed. "I am Detective Laura Chen, Savannah Police Department. Dr. Hart briefed me on your condition. I need to ask you some questions." I pushed myself up against the pillows. "Ask me anything." She opened the folder and took out a pen. "Let us start with who had access to your home in the last 72 hours. I took a breath. And then I told her everything. I told her about the funeral and the envelope. About Grace's 8-page letter. About the Giant Learn. The 43 families. The $3.2 million. Harold Jennings. I told her about Sophie and the DNA test. I told her about Nathan's reaction when I confronted him. The fury, the denial. The words that still echoed in my skull. "You are a senile old man being manipulated by a dead woman." And I told her about the bathroom. The 5 minutes. The medicine cabinet. Chen wrote quickly, her pen scratching across the paper. She did not interrupt. She let me talk until I had emptied everything. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me. "Mr. Caldwell, do you have the letter and documents with you?" "They are at my house. Kitchen table. I will need to collect them as evidence." She paused. "And the DNA test?" "On the table with everything else." Chen nodded. "I am going to start an investigation immediately. I will get a warrant to search your son's home and his business records. I will also contact the laboratory in Atlanta to verify the DNA results independently." She stood and tucked the folder under her arm. "In the meantime, you cannot go back to your house. Whoever did this may try again. Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" I shook my head. "Not really. I will arrange a hotel. Somewhere quiet. Off the main road. We will keep it discreet." She handed me a business card with her direct number. "If anything feels wrong, you call me. Day or night. Do not hesitate." I nodded. "Thank you, Detective." She was almost at the door when she turned back. "One more thing. I spoke with Chatham County Child Protective Services this morning about a girl named Sophie Nguyen, age 7, currently in foster care. Miss Andrea Park is handling her case. She is arranging a supervised visit for you tomorrow morning at 9. My heart jumped. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," Chen confirmed. "You will finally get to meet your granddaughter. Properly, I mean." After she left, I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Outside the window, Savannah was going about its afternoon. Cars moving, birds singing, the world carrying on as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Somewhere in this city, my granddaughter was sleeping in a stranger's house, holding a stuffed rabbit, probably wondering why her mother was never coming home. And somewhere else, my son was sitting in his living room, maybe pouring himself a drink, maybe watching television, maybe doing whatever a man does after he has tried to make his own father disappear. Tomorrow, I would meet Sophie. I would look into her eyes, Grace's eyes, and I would try to find the right words. I had no idea what those words would be, but I knew one thing. I was done being silent. The waiting room at the Chatham County Child Protective Services office smelled like floor cleaner and stale coffee. The walls were painted a pale yellow that was probably meant to feel cheerful, but just looked tired. There were posters about foster care, a plastic bin of toys in the corner, and a clock on the wall that ticked louder than any clock should. I sat in a hard plastic chair with my hands wrapped around a small guitar. I had bought it the evening before, from a music shop, 2 blocks from the hotel. A quarter-size acoustic, cedar top, nylon strings, the kind made for small hands. I had tuned it carefully in the hotel room, checking each string twice, 3 times. It had to be perfect. My left wrist was still in a brace from the fall. My ribs ached when I breathed too deeply. But I was here. That was what mattered. The door opened. A woman in her 40s stepped out, clipboard in hand, her smile warm but careful. "Mr. Caldwell, I am Andrea Park. We spoke on the phone. Thank you for coming." I stood, shaking her hand. Behind her, a younger woman appeared. Late 30s, kind eyes, calm voice. "This is Dr. Caroline Shaw," Miss Park said. "She is a child psychologist. She will be sitting in on the visit to make sure Sophie feels comfortable." Dr. Shaw shook my hand gently. "It is nice to meet you, Mr. Caldwell. Sophie has been through a great deal. We are taking this very slowly." "I understand," I said. Miss Park glanced toward the hallway. "She is a little nervous, but she knows someone is here to see her." My chest tightened. "Can I see her?" Miss Park smiled. "Give us just a moment." They disappeared down the hall. I stood there in the yellow room, holding the small guitar, staring at the empty doorway. The clock ticked. My heart beat so loudly I was sure everyone in the building could hear it. Then she appeared. A small girl with dark hair and dark eyes. Grace's eyes. She stood in the doorway wearing a purple shirt and jeans, one hand clutching the strap of a backpack, the other wrapped around a stuffed rabbit that had been loved almost to pieces. She was smaller than I had imagined. Thinner. The kind of thin that comes from worry, not hunger. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us moved. I knelt down slowly, ignoring the pain in my ribs, until we were at the same height. I set the guitar gently on the floor beside me. "Hi," I said softly. "My name is Robert. I am your grandfather." She stared at me. Her eyes moved from my face to my hands to the guitar on the floor. Something shifted in her expression. Not recognition exactly. Something deeper. She took one small step forward. Then another. She was close enough now that I could see the freckles across her nose. The way her fingers tightened on the rabbit. "Are you the man who plays guitar through the vent?" she asked. The words hit me like a wave. My throat closed. I could not speak. I nodded. Sophie looked down at the guitar on the floor. She knelt beside it and placed her hand flat against the cedar top, the way you would touch something sacred. "Mama said the music came from a good person," she whispered. "She said the vent was magic because it carried songs from someone who cared." I reached over and slid the guitar toward her. "I brought this for you," I said. My voice was barely holding together. Sophie lifted it carefully, settling it on her small lap. She positioned her left hand on the neck, her fingers finding the strings with a sureness that startled me. Then she strummed. A simple chord. G major. Clean and bright. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. "That is the first chord you ever played through the vent," she said. I remember. Something inside me broke open. Not painfully. The way a window breaks open to let in air that has been kept out too long. I pulled her into my arms and she buried her face in my shoulder. The guitar pressed between us. The stuffed rabbit squeezed against my chest. Her small body shook with sobs she had been holding in for days, maybe weeks, maybe her whole life. "Mama said you were the only one who really cared," she cried into my shirt. "She said if anything happened to her, the guitar man would come." "I am here," I said. My voice cracked and I did not try to fix it. "I am here, Sophie. And I am not going anywhere." We sat on the floor together for a long time. Dr. Shaw watched quietly from a chair nearby, her eyes soft. Miss Park stood in the doorway, a tissue pressed to her nose. After a while, Sophie pulled back and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at me with a seriousness that did not belong on a 7-year-old face. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "You can tell me anything." She looked down at the rabbit in her lap, turning it over in her hands. "The night before Mama fell, I could not sleep. I heard a noise outside. So I went to my window and looked down. She paused. Her fingers tightened on the rabbit. There was a lady by our stairs. The front stairs. She was doing something to the step. The one that wobbles. My heart stopped. Do you know who the lady was? I asked carefully. Sophie nodded. The lady with the red hair. She comes to our house sometimes and yells at Mama. Mama told me to stay away from her. She said to remember her face. I looked at Dr. Shaw. She leaned forward, her expression grave. Sophie, Dr. Shaw said gently. Do you think you could draw what you saw? Sophie looked at her, then at me. Will it help find out what happened to Mama? Yes, I said, it will help a lot. Dr. Shaw brought over paper and crayons. Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor and drew with careful, deliberate strokes. A house. Front steps. A woman kneeling on the second step. Her hands working at something. The woman had bright red hair, drawn in thick crayon lines. And at the bottom of the page, in wobbly 7-year-old letters, Sophie had written 2 words. The angry lady. Detective Chen had been waiting in the hallway. Miss Park called her in. Chen knelt beside the drawing, studying it for a long time. You did an incredible job, Sophie, Chen said quietly. Can I take a picture of this? Sophie nodded. Chen photographed the drawing, then stood and looked at me. Her expression was grim. We will use this, she said. Before we left, Sophie reached into her backpack and pulled out the stuffed rabbit. She held it up to me. His name is Beethoven, she said. Mama named him because he listens to music, just like us. I almost laughed. Almost. But the tears came first. Sophie took my hand as we walked toward the door. Her small fingers wrapped around mine, holding tight, as if she were afraid I might vanish the way her mother had. Do not leave me, she said quietly. Do not leave me like Mama did. I squeezed her hand. I am not going anywhere, Sophie. I promise. You are never going to be alone again. I sat in the hotel room that evening staring at the photograph Detective Chen had taken of Sophie's drawing. The angry lady. A woman with red hair kneeling on the front steps of a house, her hands working at something in the dark. Drawn in crayon by a 7-year-old girl who had watched from her bedroom window the night before her mother died. It was evidence. But it was also something else. It was the last thing Sophie saw before her world ended. I set the photograph down and opened the documents Grace had left me. Tucked between the financial records and the printed emails was a handwritten list. 43 names, addresses, ages. Next to each name, Grace had written a number, the amount Nathan had stolen from them. The numbers ranged from $18,000 to over $200,000. At the bottom of the list, circled in red ink, one name, Harold and Margaret Jennings, $162,000. Lifetime savings. Detective Chen had given me Margaret's phone number that afternoon. She said Margaret had been trying to reach someone, anyone, who could help her understand what had happened to her husband's money. For 4 years, she had gotten nowhere. I called her that evening. She answered on the second ring. Mrs. Jennings, my name is Robert Caldwell. I believe my son stole your husband's retirement savings, and I have evidence. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a sound I recognized. The sound of a woman trying very hard not to cry. We agreed to meet the next morning. She chose a coffee shop on River Street, a small place with brick walls and ceiling fans that turned slowly overhead. I arrived early and ordered a black coffee I could not drink. Margaret Jennings walked in at exactly 9. She was in her early 70s, small and thin, with white hair pinned back neatly and a face that carried the kind of exhaustion that does not come from one bad night, but from years of sleeping beside an empty space in the bed. She wore a simple navy dress and a gold pin on her collar. When she sat down across from me, I saw that the pin was engraved with 2 initials, H.J. Mr. Caldwell, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled on the table. "Please, call me Robert." She nodded. "Robert, you said you have evidence." "I did." I pulled out the folder and slid it across the table. Grace Wynn collected all of this over the past several years. Financial records, transfers, shell company registrations. It proves that my son Nathan and his partner Marcus Webb diverted $3.2 million from the retirement accounts they managed in Charleston. Margaret opened the folder and looked through it slowly. Her face did not change as she read, but her hands gripped the edges of the paper tighter and tighter. She closed the folder and looked at me. "My husband Harold was an electrician," she said quietly. "He worked for the same company for 47 years. Started when he was 22. Retired at 69. Every single paycheck, he put a little aside. Sometimes it was only $20, sometimes $50. But he never missed. Not once, in 47 years. She paused. Her eyes were dry, but her voice was starting to fracture at the edges. By the time he retired, we had $162,000. It was not a fortune, but it was ours. We earned it. We planned to use it for the house, for medical bills, for whatever came. We thought we were safe." She looked down at the gold pin on her collar. Then one day Harold checked the account and it was empty. Every cent. Gone. He called the firm, and they told him there had been a market correction. He called back the next day, and they said they would look into it. He called every day for 2 weeks, and no one ever gave him a straight answer. Margaret's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. He stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He would sit at the kitchen table for hours staring at the statements, going through the numbers over and over, trying to find where the money went. He kept saying, "I must have made a mistake. I must have signed something wrong." He blamed himself, Robert. He thought it was his fault. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was old, creased so many times, the edges were soft. She unfolded it carefully and laid it on the table between us. "He left this on the kitchen table," she said. "The morning I found him." I looked down at the letter. The handwriting was shaky, written by a hand that could barely hold the pen. "Dear Maggie, I worked 47 years, and I have nothing left to give you. I am sorry. I tried my best, but it was not enough. Please forgive me. Harold." I could not breathe. The words blurred. I pressed my hand flat on the table to steady myself. Margaret folded the letter and put it back in her purse. When she looked at me again, her eyes were fierce. "Harold did not fail me," she said. "Your son failed him. Your son took everything my husband worked for and let him believe it was his own fault. And Harold could not live with that shame." "I know," I whispered. "And I am so sorry. I am sorry for what my son did to your husband, to you, to all of them." Margaret studied me for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was thin but steady. "You are not him," she said firmly. "You are not responsible for what he did. But you are the first person in 4 years who has looked me in the eye and told me the truth. And that means something." She squeezed my hand. "There are 42 other families, Robert. People who lost everything, just like us. A couple in their 80s who had to go back to work bagging groceries. A woman with cancer who could not afford her treatment. A retired teacher who lost her home." She paused. "Every single one of them is willing to testify. I have been in contact with all of them. We have been waiting for someone to listen. And now, you are here." My phone buzzed on the table. "Detective Chen," I answered. "Mr. Caldwell," Chen said. Her voice was urgent. "We got a warrant to search Grace Wynn's house. My team just finished going through the basement." She paused. "Robert, we found something hidden inside the piano. You need to come right now." I drove too fast. The streets of Savannah blurred past me, the moss-covered oaks and iron fences, and old brick buildings running together like watercolors left in the rain. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. something hidden inside the piano. The piano Grace had played every night for 6 years. The piano whose music had drifted through the basement vent and into my life and changed everything. 2 patrol cars were parked outside Grace's house when I arrived. The front door was open. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across the porch railing. A uniformed officer nodded when I showed him my identification and pointed toward the side entrance that led to the basement. I walked down the narrow staircase. The concrete steps were cold under my shoes. The air smelled like dust and old wood and something faintly sweet, like the ghost of perfume. At the bottom, I stopped. The basement was exactly as I had imagined it during all those years of listening. Concrete floor, exposed pipes running along the ceiling, a single bare bulb casting harsh light across the room, a bookshelf against one wall filled with music theory books and children's picture books stacked together, a small rug on the floor where Sophie must have sat while Grace played, and in the center of the room, the piano. It was an upright, dark wood, scratched and worn. Not expensive. The kind you find at estate sales or in the back rooms of secondhand shops. But Grace had kept it clean. The keys were yellowed but polished. A thin layer of dust had settled over the surface since she had been gone, and I could see where the forensic team had brushed it away during their search. I walked toward it slowly. The old heating vent was set into the wall just 3 feet from the piano bench. The cast-iron grate, dark with age. I had spent 6 years on the other side of that grate, listening. And Grace had spent 6 years on this side, playing. I reached out and pressed one key. Middle C. The note rang through the empty basement, clear and lonely, and then faded into silence. Detective Chen appeared at the foot of the stairs. She was wearing gloves and carrying a small evidence bag. "Over here," she said, gesturing toward the piano. She walked me around to the back of the instrument. The rear panel had been removed, exposing the strings and hammers inside. Chen pointed to a narrow space between the frame and the soundboard, a gap barely wide enough to fit a hand. "She hid it here," Chen said. "Taped to the inside of the frame, wrapped in plastic. If you did not know it was there, you would never find it." She held up the evidence bag. Inside was a small USB drive. Black. No bigger than my thumb. "We also found her laptop under the floorboards near the bookshelf," Chen continued. "It was powered off, but our tech team has accessed it. The USB contains copies of everything on the laptop, plus additional files she must have stored separately as backup." "What is on it?" I asked. Chen looked at me. "Financial records. The original account statements from the Charleston firm showing every transfer Nathan made. Emails between Nathan and Marcus Webb discussing the shell companies. Receipts from Brooks Blossoms that matched the laundered amounts." She paused. "And a video. Recorded 3 days before she died." My chest tightened. "Can I see it?" Chen hesitated. "It is evidence, Mr. Caldwell. Technically, I should not." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. "I will let you watch it once. Then it goes into the evidence locker." She pressed play. The small screen filled with a dim image. A basement. This basement. Grace sat on the piano bench, facing the camera. She was thin. Thinner than I had imagined. Her cheekbones sharp under her skin. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely. There were shadows under her eyes that looked like bruises. But her voice was steady. "My name is Grace Nguyen," she said. "I am 33 years old. I live at 47 Abercorn Street in Savannah, Georgia. I am recording this on March 15th, 2025, because I do not think I will survive the week." She took a breath. Behind her, the piano keys gleamed faintly in the low light. "For the past 6 years, I have been collecting evidence against Nathan Caldwell and his wife, Brooke Caldwell. Nathan stole $3.2 million from 43 families while working as an investment manager in Charleston, South Carolina. He laundered the money through flower shops owned by Brooke. A man named Harold Jennings lost everything and took his own life because of what Nathan did." Grace paused. She looked directly into the camera. I moved to Savannah because I wanted my daughter Sophie to be near her father, even though Nathan refused to acknowledge her. Instead of accepting us, Nathan and Brooke spent 6 years trying to destroy me. Lawsuits, threats, harassment. 2 nights ago, I saw Brooke inside my house. She was on my front staircase, tampering with the second step, the step that wobbles. She looked at me and smiled and said, "Accidents happen in old houses." Grace's voice wavered for the first time. I am hiding this video and all of my evidence inside my piano because it is the one place in this house that means something to me. Sophie learned to play on this piano. She learned Claire de Lune by listening to me through the basement vent. There is a man on the other side of that vent, Sophie's grandfather, though he does not know it yet. His name is Robert Caldwell. He has been playing guitar for my daughter through that vent for 6 years. He is the only good person left in this story. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. Robert, if you are watching this, I am sorry. I am sorry you had to find out this way. But everything you need is in this piano. The financial records, the emails, the proof, all of it. She turned slightly and placed her hand on the piano keys. She pressed one note, middle C, the same note I had just played minutes ago. In this same room. Sophie plays the piano now, Grace said through her tears. She is so talented, Robert. She learned from listening through the vent. She taught herself. Take care of her. She is your blood. She is everything good that came out of something terrible. Grace looked straight into the camera one final time. And Robert, play the truth. Play it loud, so the whole world can hear. The screen went black. I stood in the basement of Grace Wynn's house, surrounded by her books and her rug and her piano. And I wept. Not quietly, not with dignity. I put my hand on the piano keys where her hand had been 3 days before she died. And I cried the way you cry when you realize that someone you should have protected had been protecting you the entire time. Chen stood behind me, silent. She let me have the moment. When I finally straightened up and wiped my face, she put the phone away. We have everything we need, she said softly. This video, combined with the financial records and Sophie's testimony, is more than enough. I nodded. My hand was still resting on the keys. Middle C, still faintly vibrating. She knew, I said. She knew they were going to kill her. And she made sure the truth would survive. I left Grace's house just before sunset. The sky over Savannah had turned a deep amber, the Spanish moss glowing gold against the darkening oaks. My head was still spinning from the video. Grace's voice echoed in my skull, steady and broken at the same time. Play the truth. Play it loud. I turned onto Highway 80 heading east. I do not know why I went that direction instead of back to the hotel. Maybe I needed to drive. Maybe I needed the open road and the salt air from the marshes to clear my mind. The highway stretched out ahead of me, flat and straight, cutting through the wetlands toward Tybee Island. I had been driving for about 10 minutes when I came to the long downhill grade before the Lazaretto Creek Bridge. I had driven this road dozens of times. I knew the curve, knew the slope, knew the speed limit dropped to 35 before the bridge. I pressed the brake. Nothing. My foot went straight to the floor. No resistance. No friction. Just empty space where the pedal should have caught. I pressed again. Harder. My whole leg pushing down. Nothing. The car picked up speed. 35, 40, 45. The bridge was coming fast, the metal guardrails glinting in the last light of the sun. Beyond them, the dark water of Lazaretto Creek. I grabbed the emergency brake and pulled. The handle came up with a sickening looseness. No tension. No cable. Broken. 50 miles per hour now. The bridge was 200 yards away. Maybe less. I could see the concrete barrier at the curve, the point where the road bent left and the guardrail was the only thing between the asphalt and a 30-foot drop into the creek. I had seconds. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, aiming for the gravel shoulder and the drainage ditch beyond it. Better to roll into a ditch than to go through a guardrail into water. Better to crash on land than to drown. The tires screamed. The car lurched sideways, fishtailing on the asphalt. The right wheels hit the gravel, and the whole vehicle tilted. I felt the weight shift. Felt the terrible slow motion of a car leaving the ground on one side. Then it rolled. The airbag exploded into my face. The world spun. Glass shattered. Metal screamed against pavement. I was upside down, then right side up, then upside down again. Something hit my ribs, and I heard a crack that I felt more than heard. My wrist bent at an angle that wrists are not supposed to bend. Then stillness. I was hanging upside down from the seatbelt. Blood dripped from my forehead onto the crumpled roof below me. The engine was ticking. Steam hissed from somewhere. The windshield was gone. And through the empty frame, I could see the sky, upside down, turning from amber to violet. I thought about Sophie. I thought about the guitar. I thought about Middle C, ringing through an empty basement. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was back in Memorial Health. Same bright lights, same beeping machines. But this time, there were more wires, more tubes, a brace around my neck, a cast on my left wrist, tape across my ribs that sent a sharp bolt of pain through my chest every time I breathed. A nurse adjusted my IV. "You were in a car accident on Highway 80, she said. "A motorist behind you saw the crash and called 911. "You are very lucky, Mr. Caldwell." Lucky was not the word I would have used. Detective Chen arrived 2 hours later. She did not bother with small talk. She pulled up a chair, set a thick evidence bag on the table beside my bed, and opened it. "While you were in surgery," she said, "we executed a search warrant on Nathan and Brooke's residence, their vehicles, their business records. What I am about to show you is what we found." She pulled out a phone. Small, cheap, black. The kind you buy at a gas station and throw away when you are done with it. "A burner phone," Chen said. "Found in the lining of Brooke's purse. 31 text messages, all between Brooke and one contact. No name, just a number." She scrolled through the messages on her own phone, showing me screenshots. "March 14th, 11:22 at night," Chen read. "The old man found the USB. He knows everything now. Same method as before. 4,000 when it is done." My stomach turned. "We traced the number," Chen continued. "It belongs to a man named Tony Russo, 38 years old. Auto mechanic with a prior record for insurance fraud. He cut your brake lines last night in the hotel parking lot. Took him less than 15 minutes. I closed my eyes. The ceiling fan turned slowly above me. The machines beeped. "But that is not all," Chen said. She scrolled further back in the messages. Her voice dropped. "March 12th, 3 days before Grace died. Brooke sent one message to this same number." She turned the phone toward me. I read it. "The step is loose. I will handle it myself. Do not come to the house. Transfer the 8,000 to the account when it is confirmed." I stared at the screen. Read it again. A third time. "I will handle it myself." Brooke had not hired someone to push Grace down those stairs. She had not paid a stranger. She had done it with her own hands. She had walked into that house, found Grace at the top of the staircase, and pushed her. Then she had walked away and waited for confirmation. $8,000. That was what Grace's life was worth to Brooke Caldwell. Chen put the phone away. She reached into the evidence bag again and pulled out more items one by one. A bank receipt showing Brooke had withdrawn $12,000 in cash the day after Grace died. 2 passports. A printed flight itinerary. 2 tickets to Costa Rica. Departure date 9 days from now. "They were going to run," I said. "Yes," Chen replied. "And this." She held up a folder. Financial records from Brooks Blossoms. 3 locations. The books do not match. We believe they have been laundering Nathan's stolen money through the flower shops for 6 years. She set everything down and looked at me. Mr. Caldwell, we have enough. The brake cutting, the burner phone, the text messages, the financial records, the video, Sophie's testimony. I am arresting Nathan and Brooke Caldwell tomorrow morning at 6. Arrest warrants have been approved for Marcus Webb as well. I lay there staring at the ceiling. My son, my daughter-in-law, handcuffs, prison. Are you ready for what comes next? Chen asked quietly. I thought about Grace's voice on that video. I thought about Harold's letter. I thought about Sophie drawing a woman with red hair on the front steps of her house. Yes, I said. I am ready. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the hospital bed listening to the machines and watching the clock on the wall move through the small hours. 3 in the morning. 4. 4:30. Somewhere across Savannah, a team of officers was gearing up, checking weapons, reviewing floor plans, strapping on body armor. In a few hours, they would break down my son's front door. At 5:45, my phone buzzed. A text from Detective Chen. 2 words. It is time. I stared at the ceiling and waited. The video arrived at 6:22. Chen sent it directly to my phone with a short message. Executed at 0600. Both in custody. Watch when you are ready. I was not ready. But I pressed play. The screen filled with body camera footage. Pre-dawn darkness. A residential street I recognized immediately. The oaks lining the sidewalk. The Spanish moss hanging motionless in the still air. And there, at the end of the driveway, my son's house. The house he had bought with stolen money. The house where Brooke had planned the death of a woman and the attempted death of a 71-year-old man. 6 officers approached the front door in formation. The lead officer carried a battering ram. Behind him, 4 more in tactical gear, weapons drawn. A voice rang out, sharp and absolute. Savannah Police Department. Search warrant. Open the door. 3 seconds of silence. Then the ram hit the door and the wood splintered inward and everything happened at once. Officers flooded through the opening, flashlights cutting through the dark interior, voices shouting commands that overlapped into a wall of noise. Get on the ground. Hands where I can see them. Do not move. And there in the living room, caught in the glare of 6 flashlights, stood my son. Nathan was in his pajamas. Barefoot. His hair was flattened on one side from the pillow. His face was the color of paper. His mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. He raised his hands slowly, fingers spread wide. And for a moment he looked like the little boy who used to hold his arms up when he wanted me to carry him. Then they put him on the floor. Face down, hands behind his back. The click of handcuffs sounded like a small bone breaking. Brooke came out of the bedroom 30 seconds later. She did not run. She did not scream. She walked into the hallway with her chin raised and her eyes flat, wearing a silk robe and slippers, as though she were answering the door for a delivery she had been expecting. When the officer told her to turn around and place her hands behind her back, she did it without a word. She did not look at Nathan. She did not look at anyone. They were led outside separately. Nathan's eyes darted left and right as they walked him down the driveway, searching for an escape that did not exist. Brooke walked in a straight line, her back rigid, her face a mask of nothing. 2 patrol cars waited at the curb. Nathan went into one. Brooke went into the other. The doors closed. The video ended. I set the phone down on the hospital blanket and stared at the dark screen. My son in handcuffs, face down on his own living room floor. I had watched him take his first steps in that same neighborhood, had watched him ride his bicycle down that same street, and now I had watched him get arrested for conspiracy and fraud and accessory to murder. Chen called an hour later. Tony Russo was arrested last night at his apartment, she said. He confessed within 40 minutes. Gave us everything. Names, dates, amounts. He confirmed that Brooke contacted him first in early March to cut Grace's brake lines as a backup plan in case the staircase did not work. When Grace died from the fall, Brooke canceled the brake job but kept Russo on standby. She paused. After you found the USB, Brooke reactivated the plan. She texted Russo the night of March 18th. New target. The grandfather. Same method. 4,000 cash. I closed my eyes. We also arrested Marcus Webb this morning at his home in Pooler, Chen continued. He is Nathan's business partner and co-conspirator in the retirement fraud. He has been helping them launder money through Brooks Blossoms for 6 years. The financial trail is extensive. Federal prosecutors are already involved. Federal, I said. Yes. The fraud crosses state lines. Charleston to Savannah. The United States Attorney's Office has taken jurisdiction. This is now a federal case. She let that settle. Chen continued. In Nathan and Brooks' house, we found additional evidence. A laptop with deleted files that our tech team is recovering. A safe containing $47,000 in cash. And a second burner phone, this one belonging to Nathan, with text messages between him and Marcus Webb discussing the shell companies. What are the charges? I asked. For Nathan, Chen said. Federal wire fraud. Money laundering. Conspiracy to commit murder. 2 counts of attempted murder against you. Accessory to the death of Grace Nguyen. She paused. For Brooke. First-degree murder of Grace Nguyen. 2 counts of attempted murder against you. Money laundering. Conspiracy. Obstruction of justice. And Marcus Webb? Federal wire fraud. Money laundering. Conspiracy. He is cooperating. He wants a deal. I was quiet for a long time. Through the hospital window I could see the sun climbing over the Savannah rooftops, warm and golden, as though the world did not know what had happened. Trial is set for 60 days from now, Chen said. Federal Court, Southern District of Georgia. I will need you to testify. Margaret Jennings and the other families as well. And Sophie, if Dr. Shaw clears her. I will be there, I said. That afternoon my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost did not answer. But something made me pick up. Dad. Nathan's voice. Quiet. Cold. The warmth he used to put on like a costume was gone. What was left underneath was something I barely recognized. You think you have won, he said. But you have not. You have destroyed this family. You have destroyed everything I built. And for what? A dead woman and a kid who does not even know you. She knows me, I said. She recognized my guitar through a vent. She knew me before she ever saw my face. Nathan was silent for a moment. Then his voice dropped lower. When I get out of here, you are going to regret this. I promise you that. I held the phone steady. My hand did not shake. Not this time. You are not getting out, Nathan. Not for a very long time. I hung up. Set the phone on the table. Looked out the window at the Savannah sky. Then it rang again. Different number, I answered. Mr. Caldwell. Brooks' voice. Smooth. Controlled. As cold as the first frost on a headstone. You have no idea what you have started, old man. I do, I said. And I should have started it 6 years ago. I hung up and turned the phone off. I was done listening to them. I had a trial to prepare for, a granddaughter to take care of, and 43 families counting on me to tell the truth. The federal courthouse in Savannah is a limestone building on Bull Street with tall windows and columns that make it look like a place where history happens. I had driven past it 1,000 times without ever going inside. Now I was walking through its front doors with a cast on my wrist and tape around my ribs. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, an American flag behind the judge's bench. Every seat was taken. Margaret Jennings sat in the 3rd row. Harold's gold pin on her collar. Beside her, row after row of faces I did not recognize. 43 families. They had come from Charleston, from Savannah, from towns I had never heard of. Some had driven through the night. Margaret caught my eye and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. At the prosecution's table, Ada Victor Reyes arranged his files with calm precision. Early 40s. Dark suit. The kind of voice that filled a room without trying. And across the aisle, my son. Nathan sat in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, staring at the table. He had lost weight. His eyes were red and swollen. Beside him, his public defender Richard Hale shuffled papers with nervous energy. At the second defense table, Brooke sat perfectly still. Same orange jumpsuit, but she made it look deliberate. Her red hair was pulled back tight. Her face showed nothing. No fear. No guilt. Her attorney, Lisa Pratt, sat beside her with arms crossed. All rise. Judge William Porter entered. Mid-60s. Silver hair. Reading glasses. He sat. We sat. And the room went still. We are here for the trial of Nathan Caldwell, Brooke Caldwell, and Marcus Webb, Judge Porter said. The jury has been seated. We will now hear opening statements. He nodded to the prosecution. Reyes stood and walked to the center of the room. This is a case about a man who stole the futures of 43 families, he began. A man who took $3.2 million from people who had worked their entire lives. Teachers, electricians, nurses, retirees who trusted him with their savings. And when one of those families lost everything, and a man named Harold Jennings took his own life, Nathan Caldwell did not stop. He moved to Savannah, married Brooke, and built a new life on the ruins of the lives he destroyed. Reyes paused. When Grace Wynn, the mother of Nathan's own child, threatened to expose the truth, they killed her. Brooke Caldwell pushed Grace down a flight of stairs with her own hands, and when Nathan's father discovered the evidence, they tried to kill him too. Twice. He looked at the jury. The evidence is overwhelming. Text messages, financial records, a confession, testimony from 43 families, and a video recorded by Grace Wynn 3 days before her death, in which she names her killers and begs for justice. By the end of this trial, you will hold them accountable. He sat down. Richard Hale stood. My client made terrible financial mistakes, he said carefully. He acknowledges that. But he did not kill Grace Wynn. He did not tamper with medication. He did not hire anyone to cut brake lines. He sat. Lisa Pratt stood for Brooke. The case against my client rests on text messages that could have been sent by anyone, and the testimony of a convicted criminal who cut a deal. No fingerprints. No DNA on the staircase. No eyewitness. Where there is reasonable doubt, you must acquit. She sat. The judge called the first witness. The state calls Detective Laura Chen. Chen took the stand and Reyes walked her through the investigation. The funeral. The envelope. The DNA test. The medication tampering. The USB in the piano. The burner phone, with 31 messages. She presented each piece methodically, holding up photographs, screenshots, lab reports. The state calls Tony Russo. Russo looked small on the stand. His hands shook as he was sworn in. Brooke Caldwell contacted me in early March, Russo said quietly. She offered me $4,000 to cut the brake lines on Robert Caldwell's car. She said to make it look like an accident. And did you do it? Yes. Before that, did Brooke contact you about another target? Yes. In February. She asked about cutting the brake lines on Grace Wynn's car as a backup plan. But Grace died before that was necessary. Hale stood for cross-examination. Mr. Russo, you are a convicted felon, serving 12 years. Why should this jury believe you? Because I have the text messages and the bank transfers. And I already admitted what I did. I have nothing to gain by lying. The state calls Dr. Alan Whitfield, forensic pathologist. Whitfield was tall, gray-haired, precise. He explained the injuries on Grace's body, the fracture pattern on her skull, the angle of impact. In your professional opinion, Reyes asked, Is this consistent with an accidental fall? No. The injury pattern indicates force applied from behind. This was not a fall. This was a push. Reyes looked at the clock. Then at the jury. Your Honor, the prosecution requests a recess until tomorrow morning. At that time, we will call Robert Caldwell to the stand. And after that, the jury will hear from Grace Nguyen herself. The gallery murmured. Grace was dead. How could they hear from her? Judge Porter tapped his gavel. Court is adjourned until 9 tomorrow morning. I stood on legs that felt like water. Margaret squeezed my arm as I passed her row. Tomorrow, she whispered. Tomorrow, they hear the truth. I woke before dawn. The hotel room was still dark. I lay there for a long time, listening to my own breathing and thinking about what I was about to do. In a few hours, I would sit in a witness box and tell 12 strangers that my son was a thief, a liar, and an accomplice to murder. And then I would watch them play a video of a dead woman who had trusted me to finish what she started. I showered. I dressed in the best suit I owned, a navy blue one I had bought for Eleanor's funeral 8 years ago. I knotted my tie with my one good hand, the cast on my left wrist making everything slower. I looked at myself in the mirror, 71 years old. Bruised. Broken wrist. Tape around my ribs. I looked like a man who had been through a war. I suppose I had. The courtroom was full again when I arrived. Same faces. Same silence. Margaret, in the third row. The 43 families behind her. Nathan, at the defense table. Smaller than yesterday. Brooke beside him. Still as stone. Ada Reyes stood. The state calls Robert Caldwell. I got up. My legs felt unsteady. The walk from my seat to the witness box was maybe 20 feet, but it felt like crossing a desert. I was sworn in. I sat down. The microphone was too close to my face. I adjusted it with my good hand. Reyes approached. His voice was gentle. Mr. Caldwell, can you tell the jury about your relationship with Grace Nguyen and her daughter Sophie? I took a breath. For 6 years, I knew Sophie through a heating vent in my basement. Her mother played piano on the other side every night. Debussy, Claire de Lune. I started playing my guitar. And one evening, a small voice came through the vent and said, "More, please." That was how it started. The courtroom was very quiet. I left her candy and little melodies through a gap in the fence my son had built. She left me drawings and wildflowers. When she was old enough to talk, we would sit on opposite sides of that fence, and I would tell her stories, and she would tell me about school. I taught her the names of constellations. She taught me the names of her stuffed animals. I paused. My throat was tight. I did not know she was my granddaughter. Not until Grace's letter. But I loved her before I knew. I loved her from the first time she laughed through that vent. Reyes nodded. Did Grace ever tell you she was afraid? Yes. 6 months before she died. She told me they were hiding something terrible. She asked me to promise I would take care of Sophie if something happened to her. I promised. And did you keep that promise? I am trying to. Reyes walked me through the rest. The funeral. The envelope. The letter and its revelations. The DNA test. The confrontation with Nathan. The medication tampering. The car crash on Highway 80. I told it all, plainly, without embellishment, letting the facts carry their own weight. When I finished, Reyes paused. He looked at me for a long moment. Mr. Caldwell, do you believe your son is guilty? I looked across the courtroom at Nathan. He was staring at me. His eyes were red. His hands were clenched on the table in front of him. For a moment I saw him at 8 years old, sitting on the back porch in Savannah, learning his first guitar chord, G major. The same chord Sophie had played at the CPS office when she recognized me. Yes, I said. And saying that is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Nathan's head dropped. His shoulders shook. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Reyes sat down. Richard Hale stood for cross-examination. He walked toward me. Slowly. Mr. Caldwell, you are 71 years old. Is that correct? Yes. And in the past 2 months you have been hospitalized 3 times. Medication. Overdose. A car accident. And the initial collapse at your home. Yes. Hale tilted his head. With all due respect, sir, is it possible that your memory of certain events has been affected by these medical incidents? That perhaps some details have become confused over time? I looked at him. I understood what he was doing. An old man. Hospitalized. Confused. Easy to discredit. My memory is fine, I said. My voice was steady now, steadier than it had been all morning. I remember every song Sophie played through that vent. Every single one. I remember the first time she laughed. I remember the drawing she left me of a yellow bird when she was 3 years old. I remember the day Grace told me she was scared. And I remember the morning I woke up on my kitchen floor because someone had replaced my medication with a dose that should have killed me. I looked at Hale. My body may be broken, sir, but my mind is perfectly clear. Hale paused. He glanced at the jury. Several of them were watching me with something that looked like respect. He sat down. No further questions, Your Honor. Reyes stood again. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to play Exhibit 47, a video recorded by Grace Wynn 3 days before her death. A large screen was wheeled to the front of the courtroom. The lights dimmed. The room went absolutely silent. I could hear Margaret breathing 3 rows behind me. I could hear the faint hum of the projector warming up. Reyes pressed play. The screen flickered. Then it filled with light. A basement. A piano. And a woman sitting on the bench, looking directly into the camera. Grace. She was thinner than I had imagined during all those years of listening. Her cheekbones were sharp. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely. There were shadows under her eyes that looked like bruises. But when she spoke, her voice was the same voice I had heard through the vent for 6 years. Quiet. Steady. Unbreakable. My name is Grace Wynn, she said. I am 33 years old, and I am recording this because I do not think I will survive the week. The courtroom went silent the moment the screen flickered to life. I had seen that video once before, in Grace's basement, standing next to Detective Chen with dust on my shoes and tears on my face. But watching it again in a federal courtroom packed with 200 people, with the defendant sitting 20 feet from the screen, was something else entirely. Grace appeared wearing a plain white blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and the light from the basement window caught the side of her face in a way that made her look younger than 33. Behind her stood the upright piano where she had hidden the USB drive. The same piano where Sophie learned to play Clair de Lune. The timestamp read, March 15th, 2025, 3 days before she died. She looked directly into the camera. My name is Grace Wynn. I am 33 years old. I live at 47 Abercorn Street, in Savannah, Georgia, with my daughter Sophie, who is 7. I am recording this because I believe I may not survive the next week. If you are watching this, then I was right. Margaret Jennings covered her mouth with both hands in the second row. Her shoulders were shaking, but she did not look away. She had told me about Harold's 47 years as an electrician, about the savings Nathan stole, about the note her husband left before he walked into the garage and never came back. Grace continued without rushing, as though she had rehearsed every word but still meant each one. In 2019, I was hired as an accountant at Caldwell and Webb Financial Services. Within 6 months, I discovered that Nathan Caldwell and his partner Marcus Webb were operating a Ponzi scheme disguised as a retirement fund. They stole $3.2 million from 43 families over 18 months. When I confronted Nathan, he told me that if I went to the authorities, he would make sure my daughter and I disappeared. ADA Victor Reyes stood perfectly still near the prosecution table. His hands were clasped behind his back. Grace was doing the work that no living witness could do. She was testifying from beyond the grave. Grace described the forged signatures, the shell companies, the money moving through flower shops called Brooks Blossoms. She named Marcus Webb as the primary money launderer. She named Brooke Caldwell as the person who managed the cash withdrawals. She named Nathan as the architect. Then she paused. When she raised her eyes again, there was something different in them. Not fear. Something closer to grief. Robert Caldwell, Nathan's father, lives next door to me. He is 71 years old. He is a good man. For the past 6 years, he has played guitar for my daughter through a heating vent in our shared basement wall. Sophie calls him the music man. She does not know he is her grandfather. Robert does not know either. Nathan made sure of that. I pressed my hand against my chest and felt my heart hammering against my ribs. 200 people were watching, and I could not stop myself. Grace held up a photograph of Sophie sitting at the piano. Beethoven. The stuffed rabbit propped on the bench beside her. Sophie is Nathan Caldwell's biological daughter. The DNA probability is 99.94%. I am asking Robert Caldwell to please protect my daughter. She trusts the music. She trusts the man who plays it. Please, do not let them take her away. The screen went dark. The courtroom was completely silent. Nobody moved. The air felt thick, as if sound itself had been removed from the room. Judge William Porter removed his glasses and set them on the bench. The court will take a 15-minute recess. But nobody stood up right away. Margaret reached across the wooden divider and placed her hand on the shoulder of the woman next to her. I did not know the woman's name, but I knew she was one of the 43. During the recess, Ada Reyes told me that Margaret had asked to read Harold's suicide note to the jury. The judge had approved it. When the court reconvened, Margaret walked to the witness stand. She was 72 years old and moved slowly, but her back was straight and her voice did not shake. She unfolded a single sheet of lined paper. Dear Margaret, I worked 47 years and I have nothing left to give you. I am sorry. I love you. Harold. 23 words. That was all Harold Jennings left behind after 47 years of marriage and 47 years of honest work. 23 words written with a pencil that was probably dull because Harold never threw anything away. I looked at Nathan. He was staring at the table. Richard Hale had one hand on his arm. Brooke sat at the adjacent table with Lisa Pratt, wearing the same blank expression she had worn since the trial began. That blankness frightened me more than anything Nathan had ever said. After Margaret stepped down, Reyes called one final witness. Dr. Caroline Shaw, Sophie's psychologist, testified that Sophie had drawn a picture during their second session. The drawing showed a tall woman with red hair standing at the top of a staircase, and a smaller woman with dark hair falling backward. Sophie had written 2 words beneath it, in large, uneven letters. Mean lady. Reyes placed the drawing on the overhead projector as Exhibit 51. 12 jurors looked at the crayon lines, and I watched 3 of them close their eyes. Judge Porter adjourned for the day. As I walked out, I passed the 43 families. One by one, they stood. They did not applaud or speak. They simply stood until I had passed. Margaret caught my hand and squeezed it once. Outside, Detective Chen was waiting by her car. The jury saw everything, she said. Tomorrow is closing arguments, she added. Reyes is confident. I leaned against the car and looked up at the stars appearing over the live oaks. I am not thinking about the verdict right now, I said. I am thinking about a little girl who drew a picture of the woman who killed her mother, and when this is over, I am going to take her home and teach her every song I know. Chen nodded and opened the car door. I climbed in slowly because my ribs still ached from the crash on Highway 80, and my wrist was still in a cast, and I was 71 years old. And none of that mattered, because tomorrow the jury would decide. And after that, I would fight for Sophie. The morning of the verdict, I put on the same navy blue suit I had worn every day of the trial. The left sleeve was still pinned back slightly to accommodate the cast on my wrist. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at the hotel and looked at the man staring back at me. He looked older than 71. He looked like a man who had buried a neighbor, lost a son, survived 2 attempts on his life, and discovered a granddaughter, all within the span of 3 months. That was exactly what he was. Detective Chen picked me up at 8:15. She did not say much during the drive. The Savannah morning was overcast, the kind of gray sky that sits low over the city like a lid on a pot. When we pulled into the courthouse parking lot, I saw them, the 43 families. They were already gathered near the front steps, standing in small clusters, holding coffee cups in each other's hands. Margaret Jennings was near the center, wearing a dark green dress I had not seen before. She saw me and nodded once. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Every seat was taken. Judge William Porter entered at exactly 9 o'clock and called the room to order. He asked the jury foreperson whether the jury had reached a verdict. A woman in the front row of the jury box stood. She was perhaps 50 years old, with short gray hair and steady hands. She said yes. The clerk read the charges one at a time. On the charge of wire fraud against Nathan Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of money laundering against Nathan Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Nathan Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder of Robert Caldwell, medication tampering against Nathan Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of accessory to the murder of Grace Wynn against Nathan Caldwell, guilty. 5 counts. 5 times the word guilty filled the courtroom like a bell, striking in a church tower. Nathan sat motionless. Richard Hale placed a hand on his shoulder, but Nathan did not react. He stared at the table, as if the wood grain contained something only he could see. Then the clerk turned to Brooke. On the charge of first-degree murder of Grace Wynn against Brooke Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder of Robert Caldwell, brake line sabotage against Brooke Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of money laundering against Brooke Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy against Brooke Caldwell, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice against Brooke Caldwell, guilty. Brooke did not flinch. She sat with her hands folded on the table and her eyes fixed on the wall behind the judge, the same blank expression she had worn since the first day of the trial. Lisa Pratt whispered something in her ear. Brooke did not respond. Marcus Webb had already pleaded guilty to wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy in exchange for his cooperation. His sentencing would come later. Judge Porter scheduled the sentencing hearing for 2 weeks from that day. He thanked the jury for their service and dismissed them. As the 12 men and women filed out, the foreperson glanced in my direction. She did not smile. She did not need to. Her eyes said what her mouth could not say in that room. The courtroom erupted the moment the judge left the bench. Not in cheering, not in shouting. The 43 families simply stood and held each other. Some cried quietly. Some did not cry at all. Margaret Jennings pressed Harold's suicide note against her chest with both hands and closed her eyes. The woman beside her put an arm around Margaret's shoulders and held her there. I sat in my seat for a long time. I did not stand. I did not speak. I watched Nathan being led out through the side door in handcuffs, and I tried to find something inside myself that felt like satisfaction or relief. I could not find it. What I found instead was an emptiness that tasted like cold coffee and smelled like old wood. My son was a thief and a conspirator and an accessory to murder, and no verdict in the world could change the fact that I had raised him. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. ADA Victor Reyes requested maximum sentences. He read a statement on behalf of the 43 families. He read the names of every family, one by one, and the amount each had lost. The list took 11 minutes. When he finished, he placed Harold Jennings's suicide note on the overhead projector one final time. 23 words, Reyes said. That is what 47 years of honest work became after Nathan Caldwell was finished. Judge Porter sentenced Nathan Caldwell to 55 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 35 years. Nathan stood when the sentence was read. His legs buckled slightly, and a marshal steadied him by the elbow. He did not look at me. He had not looked at me once during the entire trial. Brooke Caldwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder of Grace Wynn, plus consecutive sentences for attempted murder, money laundering, conspiracy, and obstruction. When the judge read the sentence, Brooke's expression did not change. She stood, turned, and walked toward the side door with the same measured steps she had used every day. The door closed behind her, and she was gone. Marcus Webb received 25 years with the possibility of parole after 15, in consideration of his cooperation. After the sentencing, I walked outside into the Savannah afternoon. The sky had cleared. The live oaks along the courthouse sidewalk cast long shadows across the pavement, and somewhere in the distance I could hear a church bell ringing, though I could not tell from which direction. Margaret Jennings found me on the steps. She took my hand and held it. "Harold would have liked you," she said. "I think I would have liked him," I said. She squeezed my hand once and let go. Then she walked down the steps toward her car, and I watched her until she disappeared around the corner. Detective Chen appeared beside me. "There is one more fight," she said. "The custody hearing is scheduled for next month. Nathan's sister Rachel has filed a petition." "I know," I said. Chen looked at me carefully. "Are you ready for that?" I thought about Sophie. I thought about the guitar through the vent, and the stuffed rabbit named Beethoven, and the drawing of the mean lady, and the photograph Grace held up in her video. I thought about Claire de Lune. "I have been ready for 6 years," I said. "I just did not know it until now." The custody hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in the Chatham County Family Court, a smaller building 3 blocks south of the federal courthouse, where Nathan and Brooke had been sentenced. The room was quieter than the criminal courtroom. No jury box, no gallery packed with 43 families. Just a judge, 2 attorneys, a court reporter, a child psychologist, a caseworker, and the people who wanted to take Sophie home. Judge Patricia Dunn presided. She was in her early 60s with silver reading glasses and a voice that carried the careful patience of someone who had spent decades deciding where children would sleep at night. She reviewed the case file for several minutes before looking up. Rachel Caldwell sat on the left side of the room with her attorney, a man named Stephen Park. Rachel was Nathan's younger sister, 32 years old, living in Charleston. She worked as a dental hygienist and owned a small house with a fenced yard and a spare bedroom already painted lavender. She had no criminal record. She had visited Sophie twice during the foster care placement and brought her a stuffed cat and a coloring book. On paper, she was a reasonable choice. I sat on the right side with my attorney, Diana Marsh, the same lawyer who had handed me Grace's envelope at the funeral 3 months earlier. Diana had taken my case without hesitation when I told her I wanted custody of Sophie. She said she owed it to Grace. Rachel's attorney spoke first. He described Rachel as a stable, healthy, 32-year-old woman with a steady income, a suitable home, and a genuine desire to care for her niece. He pointed out that I was 71 years old, had recently been hospitalized twice, had a broken wrist that was still healing, and had a documented history of high blood pressure. He said that while my intentions were admirable, the court had to consider Sophie's long-term well-being. He asked the judge to consider what would happen to Sophie in 5 years, in 10 years, if my health continued to decline. It was a fair argument. I had asked myself the same questions every night since the trial ended. I lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling and counted the reasons why a judge might say no. My age, my health, the fact that I had not known Sophie existed until 3 months ago. The fact that my own son was serving 55 years in federal prison. Every reason pointed away from me. Diana stood and presented our case. She described the 6 years of music through the heating vent. She told the judge about the guitar I played every evening and the songs Sophie learned to recognize by ear. She submitted the testimony of Dr. Caroline Shaw, who had been working with Sophie since her placement in foster care. Dr. Shaw's report stated that Sophie displayed a secure emotional attachment to me and referred to me consistently as the music man. The report noted that Sophie showed signs of anxiety around unfamiliar adults, but demonstrated calm and trust during her supervised visits with me. Diana also submitted a letter from Andrea Park at Child Protective Services, confirming that every supervised visit between Sophie and me had been positive, and that Sophie had asked repeatedly when she could go home with the man who plays guitar. Rachel testified next. She spoke honestly. She said she loved Sophie and wanted to give her a normal childhood. She said she had taken time off work to visit and had already enrolled Sophie in a local elementary school in Charleston. She said she understood that Robert was a good man, but that a 7-year-old girl needed someone who could keep up with her for the next 11 years. I respected Rachel for that. She was not cruel. She was not selfish. She was a young woman who believed she could give Sophie something I could not. And she was not entirely wrong. Then, it was my turn. Diana asked me to describe my relationship with Sophie. I told the judge everything. I told her about the first night I heard Claire de Lune through the vent and thought I was dreaming. I told her about the knock, 3 soft taps, and the small voice that said, "More please." I told her about 6 years of candy and drawings and wildflowers passed through a gap in the fence. I told her about the quarter-size guitar I bought the night before our first meeting at the CPS office, and how Sophie played a G major chord the moment she held it, the same chord I had taught her through a wall. I told the judge that I was 71 years old, and that I had a broken wrist and high blood pressure, and that I had been hospitalized twice in 3 months. I said I would not pretend those things did not matter, but I also said that I had made a promise to Grace Wynn, even though I did not know it at the time. Every song I played through that vent was a promise. Every piece of candy I passed through the fence was a promise. I had 6 years of promises to keep, and I intended to keep every single one. Judge Dunn listened without interruption. When I finished, she turned to Dr. Shaw and asked a single question. "In your professional opinion, what is in the best interest of this child?" Dr. Shaw paused before answering. Sophie has experienced the traumatic loss of her mother, the arrest of her biological father, and the complete disruption of her daily life. In my sessions with her, the one consistent source of comfort she identifies is music. Specifically, the music she associates with Mr. Caldwell. When I asked Sophie where she feels safest, she said, "Where the guitar is." Judge Dunn nodded slowly. She removed her reading glasses and looked at both sides of the courtroom. Then she asked to speak with Sophie. Andrea Park brought Sophie into the judge's chambers. I was not present for that conversation, but Diana told me later what happened. Judge Dunn asked Sophie simple questions. She asked where Sophie liked to play. She asked who Sophie talked to when she felt scared. She asked Sophie what she wanted. Sophie said one sentence, "I want to live with the music man. He is my grandfather, and he plays guitar, and he promised he would not leave me alone." The hearing resumed 20 minutes later. Judge Dunn returned to the bench and read her decision. She granted full legal and physical custody of Sophie Nguyen to Robert James Caldwell. She noted my age and health concerns, but stated that the evidence of a sustained emotional bond, combined with Dr. Shaw's professional recommendation and Sophie's own expressed wishes, outweighed those factors. She ordered regular health evaluations every 6 months and appointed a guardian ad litem to review Sophie's welfare annually. She granted Rachel Caldwell visitation rights on the first and third weekends of every month. Rachel cried quietly when the decision was read. I walked over to her afterward and told her she was welcome in our home any time. She nodded and said thank you. I meant it. Sophie needed as much family as she could get. Diana drove me to the foster care facility. When I walked through the door, Sophie was sitting on the floor with Beethoven in her lap, drawing a picture of a house with a piano in the front yard. She looked up and saw me, and she did not say a word. She just stood and walked to me and wrapped her arms around my waist and pressed her face against my shirt. I picked up her small suitcase with my good hand. We walked out together into the afternoon sun, and for the first time in 3 months, the world felt like it had a melody again. The first thing Sophie and I did when we got home was open every window in the house. It was late April in Savannah, and the air smelled like jasmine and warm brick, and something sweet from the bakery on Drayton Street. Sophie walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, looking at photographs of Eleanor on the mantel, running her fingers along the book spines near the kitchen. She stopped at the basement door. "Can I see the vent?" she asked. I took her downstairs. The basement was cool and dim. The heating vent sat low on the shared wall, exactly where it had always been. Sophie knelt and pressed her ear against the metal grate. She stayed like that for a long time. "I cannot hear the piano anymore," she said. "I know," I said. "But the piano does not have to stay over there." The next week, Detective Chen helped me arrange access to Grace's house. The court had released the property, and since Sophie was Grace's sole heir, everything belonged to her. I hired 2 men to carry the upright piano across the yard and through our back door. They set it in the living room near the window that faced the garden. Sophie sat on the bench and placed Beethoven beside her. She lifted her hands and played the opening notes of Clair de Lune. The sound filled the room and floated through the open windows across the yard, where the 8-foot cedar fence still stood. I had thought about that fence every day since the funeral. Nathan built it in 2019 to keep Grace isolated, to make sure I never learned the truth about Sophie. For 6 years, it divided our lives into 2 worlds, connected only by a heating vent and the music that passed through it. On the second Saturday after Sophie moved in, I borrowed a pry bar from the hardware store on Bull Street. Sophie followed me into the backyard, carrying Beethoven under one arm. I wedged the bar beneath the first board and pulled. The nail screamed. The board fell into the grass. I pulled another, then another. Sophie put Beethoven on the porch steps and stacked the fallen boards against the house. She did not ask why I was taking the fence down. It took 3 days because I could only use one hand and rested every 20 minutes. By the 3rd afternoon, the fence was gone. In its place was open grass running from our porch to Grace's old garden, where roses and hydrangeas had gone wild during the empty months. Sophie and I planted marigolds, sunflowers, and a row of lavender along the path between the 2 houses. I built a small bench from the cedar fence boards and placed it in the center of the garden. Sophie helped me sand the wood smooth, her small hands moving across the grain with the same precision she used on piano keys. In June, I started a music club in the backyard called Grace's Garden. It met every Saturday morning. I taught guitar, and Sophie played piano through the open window. The first week, 3 children came. By summer's end, there were 14. Their parents brought folding chairs and coffee and sat under the magnolia tree while their children learned G major chords and folk songs. Margaret Jennings came every week. She never played an instrument, but she sat on the cedar bench and listened, and sometimes closed her eyes and smiled in a way that made me think she was hearing Harold somewhere in the music. In September, Sophie started 2nd grade at Garrison Elementary. She carried a backpack with a piano key pattern that Diana Marsh had given her. Her teacher, Miss Alvarez, called after the first week to say Sophie wanted to play piano at the December talent show. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Sophie continued sessions with Dr. Caroline Shaw every Thursday. Some weeks were harder than others. There were nights when Sophie woke crying and called for her mother. And I sat on her bed, playing soft guitar, until she slept. There were mornings she did not want school, and I made pancakes and told stories about Eleanor until she laughed. The healing was not linear. It moved between minor and major keys, sometimes dark, sometimes bright, but always forward. In October, I established a fund called Harold's Hope with Margaret Jennings and 3 other families. It provided emergency financial assistance to elderly fraud victims in Savannah. We held a fundraiser in Grace's Garden. 43 families attended. Margaret stood on the cedar bench and gave a speech. She said Harold spent 47 years building a life, and one man tore it down in 18 months. But she said Harold also taught her that you do not stop building just because someone breaks what you made. You find new wood, and you start again. On the night before Thanksgiving, Sophie and I sat in the living room. She was at the piano. I was in the armchair with my guitar. The cast had come off 2 months earlier, and my wrist was stiff, but functional. We played together, not any particular song, just a quiet conversation between piano and guitar, the kind we had been having for 6 years through a wall. Sophie stopped and looked at me. "Grandpa," she said, "do you think my mom can hear us?" I set my guitar down. She was 7 years old. She had lost her mother, discovered her grandfather, survived a custody battle, and started a new school in 6 months. She was the bravest person I had ever known. "I think the music goes everywhere," I said. "Through walls and vents and fences and windows. And I think it goes even further than that." Sophie nodded. She turned back to the piano and played Claire de Lune. The sound drifted through the open window into the November night, past the garden where the marigolds had finished blooming, past the cedar bench, past the place where the fence used to be, and out into the sky over Savannah, where the stars hung low and close like notes on a staff waiting to be played. I closed my eyes and listened. This is where music lives, I thought. Not in a basement, not through a vent, not behind a fence. It lives in the space between two people who refuse to stop playing no matter what walls the world puts between them. And I picked up my guitar and played along.